called Protecting Your Cyber API. Oh, what's the other? Never mind. That's what I did at ShmooCon. For this, we were being far less drinking than there was at ShmooCon. For whatever reason, people think the building security and information security awareness and training program is complicated. And it's always been, I like to keep things simple, and I think that I've come up with a way, at least I've done it, it's tried, it's tested, so that's what we'll be talking about today. Bill Gardner, I'm an offensive security certified professional, along with a bunch of other certifications. That's the one I'm most proud of, because that's the one I worked the hardest for. I'm an assistant professor at Marshall University, and I teach an integrated science and technology in the undergraduate program for digital forensics and information assurance. Previous to that, I worked 20 years in various roles in private industry, law firms. I worked in law firms, I worked data centers for government contractors, and I'm a hacker. Yay! But not this kind of hacker. The mask kind of gets hot after a while, so I could never be a black hat. But I'm this kind of hacker. I'm the guy that tries to secure your networks.
Can you do that for us right now?
Yes. I'm not a hacker in the sense that I'm trying to take the word hacker back. It originally meant people who tried to push the edges of technologies and make things work in ways they weren't originally designed to do. Then there's good hackers and there's bad hackers. Unfortunately, what's happened through the use of the word hacker is it's now synonymous with the word criminal. So not all hackers are bad. Like I said, I'm a professor at Marshall University. I teach Defense Against the Dark Arts. In many ways, it sort of feels like that sometimes. It seems like magic. Co-founder of HackerCon. If you've ever been there, Charleston, West Virginia. It's held every October.
Yeah, HackerCon.
I'm now the president of AIDE, just in the last few weeks. We have this wonderful conference, and I had to put Dave in there somehow. He's not here this year. It was his first year he's missed. Dave had some pressing issues, like attending another conference, apparently. That probably pays more money than we do. So that's where he is, and that's Dr. Finger and John. And I'm a penetration tester when I'm not teaching. I spent my spring break doing an assessment for a large state agency. I do a lot of work for small, really small businesses as well, mainly in the Kanawha Valley. Do you want to know who that is? Come on. Some of you old enough to know who that is. This is Marcus Ramos. So what is security awareness training? This is the Bill Gardner definition. It's a formal program with the goal of training users potential threats to an organization information, as well as avoiding situations that might put the organization's data at risk. Not having a security awareness program is sort of like driving without your seatbelt on. Now, you may be okay, but if you're in a crash, it's not going to be all that great. I'm also a member of the Security Awareness Training Framework, which Frank is. Go check that website out. It's satf.org. What we're trying to do there is actually build a framework that's way beyond the scope of this particular presentation. I'm going to mainly focus on organizations that are medium, small businesses, much like Frank, because that's where my particular experience is. Think of the Security Awareness Program as the movie event, and this is kind of sort of the made-for-TV miniseries. So it's not going to cover everything the training work will seek to cover. So why security awareness training? People are always the weakest link. People can be easily tricked. Not all attacks are technical is the other reason. So you got to get management buy-in. You got to make sure the people that write the checks are on board with this. If not, you're going to end up in a lot of fights. Policy development. You know, developing policy is a big part of it. If you have policies, and you don't enforce them, it's just as good as not having them at all. So policy enforcement is also one of the goals of security awareness training. And cost savings. If you're not having incident response issues, or if you're not losing data or being fined by regulators, you're also saving money, and it increases your production. Now, I come from a billable hour paradigm, where if you can't work, you're not making money. And you're talking about lawyers, you're talking, sometimes they're charging hundreds of dollars an hour. So being down is a very, very bad thing. So all the goals of security awareness training, basically, these are the goals. Who here has policies? Who here does not have policies? The university actually, I don't know about what my students think of that. The university does have policies, and it's all the syllabi. Now, if you all read those policies, no, you should. Because some of the things that you might think would be cool to engage in, such as downloading music or movies or scanning the network, can get you expelled. And then all that money you spent to get to school would go right down the drain. So, security awareness program needs to be targeted. Not everyone's the same. You don't tell the same things to the guys that work in the mailroom as the guys that are on the road. So if you've got a lot of users on the road, you have to pay special attention to whatever need they may have. It's just a different thing. You're dragging laptops around. They can be stolen. They can be damaged. You know, I've dealt with laptops that were dropped out of the back of taxis. One of my former employers, you know, they had data on it, so you have to let them know that that stuff's very important. Even if it's encrypted, it's not a good idea to lose it. Don't forget the IT department. In many cases, IT security and security awareness and defenses against social engineering need to be baked into your IT processes. In my old jobs, did I have a director of IT security? No, it was me. So I'm the director of IT, which also means that I'm in charge of security. And then I have to go and have security awareness training not only for my users, but also for my IT staff. Just because you work in IT does not mean that you're an expert at IT security, believe me. Just because you're a developer does not mean you're an expert at IT security. There's all kinds of really crappy code because they wrote it to make it work, and they didn't sanitize their command line. As a result, it's vulnerable to attack. Some users have different education levels. As a result, your security awareness training for a lawyer is not going to be the same as it is for a runner. They're going to face different risks. They're going to have different needs. So you have to make it so that it's pertinent and understandable by each one of those different groups. Even a secretary is not going to have needs the same sort of security awareness training as a lawyer. And also, home users are different than corporate, and we're not really going to talk about home users in this particular talk today. But when I've done security awareness training in the corporate environment, I also try to make it personal to them by pointing out that they may very well have personal information on their work computer. If they're going to their websites to check their credit card balances, to check their web-based email, you know, they're leaving artifacts behind that an attacker could use to then, you know, if they breach the corporate network, find their personal information, they may have to go after their assets, their personal assets. Such in the case of identity theft and credit card fraud. So how often do you have security awareness training? Most people do it when you walk through the door, and you really should do it when you walk through the door, because it gives them the expectations of what is required of them to work there. And that really became a big pain in my last job, because we were being very draconian about enforcing it, and I was really having problems getting it all in. So by the time I left, we were like letting them slide a week or two before we gave them training. In all honesty, whenever you have some sort of human relations onboarding process, security awareness training should be a part of that onboarding process. Now, when you sign your papers, what your withholdings, your Yeah, when you sign that up, you should, the next thing you should do is a security awareness training program. Some people do it once a year, which I find is not enough. My last job, we had a yearly conference where we would herd all the lawyers to one place and do basically continuing education for them. One of the things we threw in was scary internet speech, is what I called it. Unfortunately, you have to scare people to some extent just to make them aware of the risk. And I try to do it continually, and I'll have at least one example of how I try to do it continually as we move through this. Is it enough to have it yearly? Is it enough to have it quarterly? No, I think that it has to be a continual process. Beyond that, it has to be engaging. One of the things I tried to do was make it personal for people. Your personal data is being protected by your organization as well. What about all the accounting data I have on you? In order to pay you, they have your social security number, the names and social security numbers of your dependents. They also have, your information for your bank if you're doing direct deposits. So all that information could very well be, and then probably is, unless they're using a third-party payment system, even in the case of a third-party payment system, they're likely to have a lot more personal information than you think about in an everyday situation. First of all, there's a lot of really crappy security awareness training programs out there. I hate to name names, so I'm not going to. One is a very large organization that is very well accepted and does training in the information security field. And anyone know how much that costs? Has anyone purchased that? It's not very good. It's not very good. It's very expensive, and it's basically canned training. And I've seen this training, and it's awful. The canned training is as good as putting a blinky light box in your environment that's supposed to protect you against something. Generally, users don't like it. As a result, I say don't buy training that's expensive. You can build your own for no money. Also, don't buy something, supposedly magically does something. In the case of these canned solutions, Kevin Metnick, I like Kevin. He's a good guy. I've met him. But he's selling these security awareness canned solutions for a lot of money. And quite frankly, I've never seen it. But users don't like canned solutions. They're not going to like sitting in front of their computer watching some guy drone on. I mean, it's much more exciting to watch me drone on. So personalized training, in my experience, in-person training is the most effective. It's hard for the person who's giving the talk about security awareness to answer questions if they're inside of a computer. Well, not literally, but there's no two-way interaction. You don't have to spend a lot of money to start a program. And actually, we'll go through some of the basics of what should be in a security awareness program. The first step is to explain risk to users. What I hear all the time from my clients and my former employers is nobody wants our data. In a case, we'll use the law firm example because that's the paradigm that I'm familiar with. You're holding the intellectual property of all of your clients. So you might have the secret formula for Coke. You represent Northrop Grumman, you might have the latest schematics for the latest land, air, sea fighter. If you work, if one of your clients is a drug company, you might have the information about the latest and greatest drugs or their drug trials on basically on your network. And traditionally, security on law firm networks have been pretty low anyway. So if you're not telling them about spearphishing some of the other stuff that's out there, you're really doing yourself and your client a disservice. But people do want your data. And I'll talk about some of the bad actors in the next few slides. The other argument is it's public information anyway. Well, if I'm an attacker, I'm going to go to your public website figure out what the email addresses are, and then I'm going to start spear phishing you. I'm going to figure out who the CEO is. I'm going to figure out who the CFO is. And I'm going to start sending them information or spear phishing which relates to their interests. And also, I might try to guess some passwords based upon either the LinkedIn profile or the Facebook profiles. So, what's their dog's name? You know, maybe they're not informed enough to not use their dog's name for a password. What's their wife's name? What's their children's name? Do you remember these different surveys that went around on MySpace and Facebook that looked totally innocuous? Like, so what street did you grow up on? What's your mother's maiden name? Where were you born? All of these are the questions to reset your passwords. So, and the other thing is that you can say that nobody wants your data, but when you get breached and you get fined millions of dollars for violating HIPAA or PCI, stuff starts getting real. So nobody wants $1 million fine for losing medical records or by violating PCI. If you're processing credit card information, you'll be covered by PCI. And just because you're compliant, like Frank said, he left. See how he is? As Hackett said before, just because you're compliant doesn't make you secure. So a lot of people will get on to compliance, the bandwagon, yes, we're PCI, DSS compliant. That's great. But it may not make you secure. You know, we're HIPAA compliant. That's great. But HIPAA does not address things other than the low-hanging fruit. Same with PCI, same thing. So let's look at the motivation of attackers. First of all, people do want their data. People want your data. So the biggest motivation of attackers is money. Identity theft, credit card theft. The second is your intellectual property, which includes trade secrets. Once again, the formula for Coke, the secret formula for the latest drug. There's hacktivism, our friends Anonymous. Hello, Internet. Hello, Anonymous. These people are hacking allegedly for political means, so we call them hacktivists. They have an agenda. So they do website defacements, and you know, there's the famous Sony breaches that happened. Was that 2011 or 2010? Basically, Sony got hit every day for about 365 days using SQL injection, which is 20-year-old attack vector, but anyway. And sometimes they did defacements, and sometimes they actually stole information. In the case of Sony, to make a long story even longer, there's this kid that jailbroke his phone. I can't remember his name. But Apple never really went after him. They asked Steve Jobs about it, and he said, that's kind of cool. I guess we'll have to raise the bar. So they released a new operating system for iOS. And so, wish I could remember his name. The same kid got a PS3 and he decided he was going to jailbreak it so he could run his own games on it. And Sony sued him. So our friends at Anonymous decided that wasn't just, so they started hacking Sony. And I have some other examples in my slides as well. And one's bragging rights. You know, if I'm in the hacker underground and I pull off something really cool, all my friends are going to think I'm really cool, so therefore bragging rights is also a motivation. One of the other things you need to tell your audience when you do security awareness training is the cost of data breaches. Here's a couple of, these are kind of older numbers. They increase every year, of course. The Ponyman Institute is a good source of up-to-date information on how much breaches cost. They actually, that's their business model. They track that data. The Digital Forensics Association is another one. But you know, we're talking about billions of dollars a year being lost because people don't know any better. Someone's phone just buzzed and I don't think it was mine. Unless someone's texting me from the audience. So threats. Let's break down the individual actors. And this is just a sort of quick look at individual actors. Basic organized hacking crews. There's a Russian business network. Chinese hackers, it's always the Chinese, right? So we call them Mandiant. Hacktivism and cyber war. Now we can have the debate all day about if cyber war exists or not, but yes, cyber war is a threat. If there's a denial of service attack against a target, like in my case when I worked at my last law firm, Anonymous went after the MasterCard payment system. So when you swipe your card, it goes back to MasterCard and tells you how much to deduct out of your account or to charge you. Well, they brought down the MasterCard payment system, but they also brought down my VPN to my Wheeling and Morgantown office. So that's an example of collateral cyber war damage, if you want to look at it that way. But we'll talk a little bit about what cyber war actually is. In that case, that's more of a hacktivism attack. So the RBN, once again, they're wearing these masks, and I just don't know how you hack wearing one of those. Commonly abbreviated RBN, multifaceted cybercrime organization. These people are mainly associated with the Russian mob. So they do everything from running drugs to child porn to you know, basically everything. They're into it. But cybercrime is very lucrative to them. They're making millions of dollars a year off of identity theft mainly. Chinese hackers, mainly they do it for patriotic reasons. They're not proud to be particularly Chinese, but they're very proud to, proud to be communist, but they're proud to be Chinese. This is the equivalent of, you know, in the United States, I think we probably even have patriotic hackers in the United States. We don't know. There are probably people doing that sort of thing. They're doing it for nationalistic reasons. But the Chinese hacker gangs are allowed to exist and operate in China because they actually help the Chinese government move their agenda forward. So they're allowed to operate there. Some of it appears to be state-sponsored. Does everyone remember APT2? Which was the recent Mandiant report that said, you know, we have hard evidence that Chinese have regiments of hackers in office buildings stealing intellectual property. And yes, you know, that's kind of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But the truth of the matter is that the Chinese, as well documented, have been stealing our intellectual property since the late 90s. Mandiant's going to hate me after this talk. In Mandiant's case, I think what they were trying to do is sell a product. It's there, it's a known threat, it's sort of like saying it's going to rain. Well, yes, it's going to rain. Unfortunately, Chinese hacking is such a part of the internet now that for someone to tell you, oh my goodness, there's Chinese hackers, is kind of silly. There's GhostNet. Remember GhostNet? It was found on a number of diplomatic computers, including the Dalai Lama. That was a Chinese operation. And GhostNet was the first one that was documented that it could turn on your camera and watch you as you sat at your computer. An advanced persistent threat, which one time was actually told to me to be a non-classified name for Chinese hacking, but now what is it? If you saw my presentation at SWICON, what's APT?
A reason to drink.
A marketing term! It has become a marketing term, unfortunately. So hacktivism, once again, we're back to our friends at Anonymous. Denial of service attacks, information theft, so that's another threat. And cyber war, politically motivated nation-state on nation-state, 2007. Russians got mad at the Estonians for removing the Russian war statue that was in the town square of every former Soviet state. So the Russians got so upset by this, they actually, instead of rolling tanks, they just took Estonia off the map, off the internet map. So it's a lot less bloody. So most attacks are targeted. All this is what the stuff you should be telling your users. Most attacks are targeted. They're targeting specific organizations or industries. They're targeting specific deliveries of payloads, email, port attacks, 0-day, also marketing term, phishing messages. So phishing, you know what phishing is, right? Somebody tell me what phishing is. One of my students. Come on.
Okay, it's whenever they target somebody and try to use social engineering to get them information.
So here's an example of a targeted attack. This is from 2010, where a law firm in Long Beach, California, was solicited to collect a debt for a man in Hong Kong, and the total debt that was to be collected was $200,000. So they collected the debt, put the cashier's check in the bank, and they took their fee, of course. They're lawyers. They took their $10,000 fee and wired the rest to Hong Kong. Well, guess what? Check's bad. So in this case, they're out what? $190, $190,000. In this case, they were actually able to get the money back. We see this scam, but we saw the scam in every law firm I've ever either consulted for or worked for. And this is still persistent today. It's sort of like the Nigerian 419 scam. They just change it up a little bit. Here's an example of our buddies at Anonymous taking down a law firm. This used to be a law firm site. Well, once they decided that, based upon a case where this defense firm defended Marines accused of killing Iraqi civilians, and they decided, well, that's not fair, that's not just. They basically defaced the firm's website. Well, this website was hosted internally, which means that they also stole the firm's email. And there's this stuff dumped all over the internet. So where do you go for stolen information on the internet? You can go to Google, it's pastebin. There was large amounts of pastebin out there, and this is actually an email from someone who worked at Pluckett and Atwood, saying that they've been hacked. They found out they've been hacked by checking. I think it was one of the big technology websites. Do you all remember? It was like Dig or something. They found out they'd been hacked on Dig. They didn't have any idea that there was a problem. And the last time I went to that website, it's still offline. This is an example of why you don't host websites internal. They break into your website, they can pivot that attack to get everything inside your network. Here's another example, quickly. I won't beat this dead horse too long. This is in 2009. There was an FBI advisory saying if you're a public relations firm or a lawyer, you're being targeted by spear phishing. And spear phishing is targeted phishing. They go to the website, figure out who you are, if you like to golf, or if you like flying model airplanes or whatever, do enough open source intelligence on you to create a profile. That makes you more likely to click on that link or to go to that website. The one that's used, Mutz uses the one, Mutz is the offensive security guy. He is offensive security. He used an attack that basically figured out his target was interested in collecting coins. So he went out and figured out what was the most kind of rare but accessible coin there was. Figured out where this guy was hanging out on a chat board that collected and traded coins. Said, hey, I've got this really rare coin. Why don't you start communicating with me? Huh?
He created a website.
Yeah, and then the guy clicks on the link to go to Mutz's website, and you pwned him that way. That's a web attack using phishing. And it's really easy using a social engineering toolkit to clone a website and then put it up. And most people don't look, especially in that case, you could probably buy a domain that was kind of sounded like it was a legitimate URL. You can also mangle a domain like our friend Boris has one called gmails.com, which he still uses on assessments, and apparently it's pretty pretty successful. By the way, don't go to gmails.com because it's likely that he's not remembered to turn off the malicious software there. Here's an example of Chinese being interested in $40 billion potash acquisition. Apparently, I didn't know there was this money in potash, or I would have changed careers a long time ago. And they broke into a number of law firms in Canada and derailed the acquisition. And that was probably another example of Chinese hackers basically promoting the agenda of the Chinese government. And I'm sure this was done by a hacking gang, and they probably got a nice little check out of it, and also the protection of the Chinese government. So this is my rant on who's responsible for security. Everybody. Someone say me? Security is everyone's responsibility. You can't stop users from clicking on links or opening sources, attachments from unknown sources. But you can educate them as to what the risk is. And that's the reason you have security awareness training. So passwords. Who can tell me if this is a good password policy? Anybody? We'll start with this. 7 characters. Is that really long enough?
What's our environment?
Any environment, in this case, I would think. I know it depends on what you're guarding, but I'd say, I don't think
You're trying to develop habits, really, and
Well-
develop good security awareness, and you want to get in
this
what
case,
they use for their home PC should
Yeah.
be just as strong as what they use.
I agree. In this case, though, this is a sucky policy.
this is a very sucky policy, and this is the one that's built into Microsoft GPO. So if you require a minimum, Microsoft will require a minimum, I think it does it by default in Windows 2008. In fact, you can't even get a really complex password into Windows 2008, Windows Server 2008. This is an example of a crappy password. You're way better off keeping it simple, stupid. Take 17 and make it 16. 16 characters is pretty complex. And passphrases will always be more secure than passwords. In my case, I use a passphrase that's probably, I don't know, 26, 27 characters.
Yeah, but if I know your company's using passphrases, I just snarf the IMDb famous movie quotes database, and I get into some of the accounts that way.
Yeah, but you
It's
might. But
It's the consistency.
okay, well, here's the
Define
thing.
environment.
Here's the thing about that, is none of this is perfect. I can't eliminate risk, I can only manage risk, and this is one way of managing risk.
Two-factor.
Oh, yeah, 2-factor is big. I'm not going to cover 2-factor in this, but basically to have a security awareness program, you need to have policies. So you need to address these things. And this is just an example of a bad policy. And this was one of the policies that was being used in one of my environments at one point in time. If you really want to know about passwords, go out and look for Pure Hate's Talk at HackerCon 2 years ago, called Your Password Policies Suck. He can profile password policies based upon the number of characters, their company, what they do for a business, and usually he can crack 99% of them using Hashcat pretty quickly by using masks. So you just overlay these things. But he's much more fluent in password cracking than I am. And there's the other issue. People make passwords too complex, so they can't remember them, which is a pain in the ass. So what's the CIA triad in information security? Confidentiality, integrity, which means all the data is there, it's all good to go, and access. This isn't access. The old thing is that I can make your system totally secure if I bury it 10 feet underground, unplugged from the internet or power under concrete. Yeah, it would be totally secure, but you can't use the damn thing. Excuse me, I'm getting really randy with my cussing. So what do you tell users about passwords? Long passwords. I tell them, and this is a Billism again, it's okay to write down your password, put it in your wallet with your money. Your wallet is a safe place. Eventually they'll learn them, but it saves a lot of time. If you constantly have to reset passwords, the password reset procedure is usually rife with danger. How do you know it's in a big environment that's that user when they call you and say reset my password? And that's a social engineering attack vector. So complex passwords, as much as a risk as not complex enough passwords. Locking computers, this is my favorite. My users loved me by the time I left my last job. Why? Because I got real draconian about them locking their computers. You work in an environment, people walking around, you don't know who they are. I could sit down at their desk and write emails to the managing partner about how I thought he dressed funny and things like that. And so I pointed out, anyone can use your computer at your security level. This is really bad in accounting situations too, because accounting people have these spreadsheets up, multiple monitors, and they don't want to lock their computer. So they'll get up and walk away from it, and there is basically the firm's financial data, or the organization's financial data, just laying it. I did an assessment one time where the first place I went was accounting, because I knew that most accounting departments have low security because they want convenience. And what did I find? Backward passwords, wire transfer passwords, a bunch of financial data kept in plain text, unencrypted, in like Notepad on the desktop. And you want to talk about keys to the kingdom. Easily, that's when you start, a nefarious person would have started draining your bank account. So if you didn't lock your computer in my last job, I left one of these. And sometimes they work. And did I misspell anything on that one? I went through like 4 permutations of this thing because I kept freaking misspelling stuff. And you come back from the printer, I'm like, I wasted money on that. So it went back and forth. And this is one that's been in my wallet for a long time. Yes?
Next time just post it on Reddit once and save all that time.
Well, that's true. My users don't use Reddit, usually. I posted on Westlaw one time. And if you want to use this, feel free. I think Tom has a variation. Tom's not even in here. I think that Tom Sealed has a variation of this that he uses. Hi, Mick.
Hey.
Your tutor's biscuit is there, but it's probably nice and cold, Dale. So, sorry about that.
That's cool.
You all don't know that we don't really pay we don't really pay speakers, but we do give them tutor's biscuits. So it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I got no issue with that.
So if you want to steal this, feel free. You probably can make a better version of this than I can. So attachments, just basically don't open attachments that you're not expecting. These are also the things you tell people in security awareness programs. Phishing. Be skeptical of emails that look like they're coming from officials. Be skeptical of email. It looks like it's coming from your bank. Thanks to our friend Dave Kennedy, you can scrape a website and make it look just like your bank's website in about 10 seconds. It doesn't take a lot of skill. He's made it very, very easy. And don't provide personal financial information to people who solicit it. So if someone calls you up and says, what's your bank routing number? That should raise a red flag. I'm sorry. So can you tell me where this goes?
No. Yes.
Where does it go?
I haven't put it in one of those extended. I can tell you.
I understand, but as a user getting this in email, the average user is going, you see this on Twitter. I click these links all the time on Twitter. Stupid. I click these links on Facebook all the time because that's convenience. But really, you know where this goes?
It
Goes to Billy.
It goes home.
Goes to AIDE.org. But that also could have went to gmails.com. Where does this QR code go?
Don't know, won't scan one.
No, exactly right. I mean, QR codes is a great attack vector, and I think you can do that in set 2. Is that
Yeah.
I can put the Bitly link into a Bitly expander and see where it is. The QR code, I can't, so I'm not
It
scanning
says
it.
it goes to 127.001.
Does it? I don't remember. I made it so long ago. Social engineering, not all attacks are technical attacks. People are the weakest link. Our friend Kevin Metnick read a book called The Art of Deception about some of the tricks, tricking people into giving out information. The only real defense against social engineering is security awareness. If your users don't know to be cautious, they won't be cautious. And here's one of Metnick's tricks. He had DMV access for a while because he would just basically call the DMV and say, I want this information. Well, after a while, they started locking down the access. You had to have a law enforcement ID number. So Kevin called the Van Nuys Police Department and said, this is Kevin down at the DMV. We're updating our database, and is your law enforcement number 12658? And of course, the person in the line goes, no, it's 998456. So he took that number and used it to continue his DMV access. No tech hacking. Is the no tech hacking book still out there?
Yes.
Johnny Long, our friend Johnny Long, the Hackers for Charity guy, wrote a very good book on no tech hacking. These issues should also be addressed by security awareness training. Dumpster diving. We actually started locking my last job was a law firm. We shredded everything, we did due diligence. But in the end, what we ended up doing was we locked our dumpsters. That way people can't pilfer through it and maybe accidentally find something we missed. Also, it keeps the bums from setting the dumpster on fire because they can't get the lid open, which happened too. Tailgating, calling somebody through. What?
That really happened?
It really happened. That was the nail. That was the final nail in the coffin. And I'm like, yo, we really need to lock our dumpsters. And then we had this mysterious dumpster fire, and they're like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We should have thought of this. And it's like $5 a month to get the chains and the locks. It's not a lot of money. So shoulder surfing. Here's an example of shoulder surfing that cracks me up. And this is going to be on the internet, so I won't identify who it is. This guy posted this picture of himself on Facebook.
Oh.
He's a systems administrator. What can you see? Well, okay, this is Johnny Long. What does a hacker see?
Screen.
They're using it.
It's very small.
If you go this close, you could probably read his email, except it's not that great. Why the hell would you post this on Facebook?
Show his ball pit.
You know what he does now? He works for the large Fortune 500 in the security department. He's a defender.
Probably had to learn to defend after posting that picture.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. He's a nice guy. I hate to pick on him, but it's still like, it just cracks me up to no end. So the other thing you should tell your users about is peer-to-peer file sharing. It has no business on a work computer. Students, it has no business on your student computer. You can get expelled. And they are very, I think the CISO at Marshall spends more time writing letters to students about downloading peer-to-peer movies and music than he does, unfortunately, have time to do more proactive things. I'm saying that because he's not here. He usually comes. But I'm sure that's a big pain in his ass. Instant messaging was never designed with security in mind. Where's that from? You Security Plus people? It's an actually in the Security Plus test, I think.
In the 1980s, when we said TCP was never designed for this, and people are idiots.
And might even be older than that. It was Unix talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't talking about commercial.
Oh.
And really, your users should not be downloading Yahoo Messenger or peer-to-peer file sharing. In the case of Yahoo Messenger, what we worry about in corporate networks is what's the data exfiltration. If someone gets mad at the organization and says, screw these guys, I'm really going to screw them, I'm going to take the secret formula and I'm going to send it out to their competitor, there are ways of monitoring that, and it's not easy. The easiest thing to do is say, don't install it. Adware, you all know what adware is. You get these pretty things like this where you're trying to download WinZip, and they also, oh, by the way,
Go ahead and download Uniblue Registry Booster 2. The problem with that is now we're seeing this with like Adobe updates. And it's usually antivirus. Have you ever tried running 2 versions of antivirus on your computer?
Yeah.
It doesn't work. They butt heads. Spyware is basically stuff that spies on you. Looks legitimate, you download it. Hey, this is really cool. Angry Birds from my computer. I didn't know if I could play on my computer. Well, you probably can, but you're also going to get a lot of your data sent back to some former Soviet republic. Web attacks nowadays, to quote my friend Dave Kennedy, people don't come into the firewalls. You have IDS, you have IPS, you have antivirus. You have all these wonderful defenses. You've built a moat around the castle. So how do they get in? They actually compromise the ad servers on legitimate sites. Then when you go to CNN.com, you magically get malware. And there's not a lot of ways to stop this. Some companies will actually limit the amount of time employees spend on the computer, which is hard because people do work on the internet. There's some really draconian things you can do to your users. I went to an AIDE event in a place that I worked that was horrible, and where did it come from? MySpace. Legitimate e-discovery work. Looking at a client claimed to be disabled. You know, you always go check it out, their public profiles to see, you know, if they're chopping wood or going to West Virginia digging ramps or whatever they're doing. Making moonshine, maybe. And all you have to do is visit the page. So we started doing, here's 2 examples. These are 2 lawyer examples. The first one is the West Virginia State Bar. Do you already remember this? Probably 2 or 3 years ago, the West Virginia State Bar realized they were compromised. They had a Linux server. I don't know if this is public, but basically they had an on-patch Linux server.
It is now.
And that's how they got in, but it was some Eastern European entity. This is still an open investigation with the Secret Service. They stole the identity of every lawyer in West Virginia.
Did you say East German or Eastern European?
Eastern European. Eastern Germany hasn't existed for a while. So, you know, they have an idea. It's one of these deals where we know where they are, and we could go pick them up, except we don't have jurisdiction. Which sucks. This is really frustrating, at least if you're doing malware incident response. You may be able to get law enforcement involved, but even then, you know. So they stole basically the identity of every lawyer in West Virginia, and what did the State Bar do? They gave them 6 months of credit reporting protection. Well, this stuff floats around on the underground in the hacker world for years. So these poor souls may find in a year or 2 they're starting to have issues. So it's not like, you know, what do you do? The other one is the West Virginia Record, which is a newspaper in West Virginia that there's a number of these newspapers across the United States that's sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. And the idea is they're trying to make West Virginia out to be a legal hellhole. There's too many lawsuits. So what they do is they publish these slip and fall lawsuits, et cetera, and actually people who are in the fence, on the plaintiff's side, both go look at this to say, well, look, so-and-so got this case, or look, so-and-so sued somebody that she represents, you know, just sort of this gossip stuff. Well, in that case, I don't know if I have a screenshot of that or not. There it is. This ad had been compromised. So all you had to do was go there, and this ad would serve you malware. In that case, since I went to journalism school back in the day, I knew the editor. I called them up and said, hey, you've got a problem. And they found out that this ad was being served on an ad network that affected hundreds of different websites just like that. And they were targeting lawyers. So those are 2 examples of target lawyers. Yeah.
How do you target lawyers if you're doing that sort of a technique? Because when you buy, maybe I'm missing that, like if you're buying ads, isn't that just kind of like wheel of
Well-
luck where it lands, or?
No, not
It depends on the ad network.
Yeah, you can specify who you want to be your target audience.
Okay.
And they can utilize things like Google Analytics and things like that to be able to direct your advertisements at your target audience. And, I mean, it's a common watering hole technique that is very effective.
I use lawyers because that's what I'm most familiar with, but I'm sure there's other, when I talked about it early, most attacks are targeted. They're going to attack a certain,
Demographic.
a certain demographic. So doctors, lawyers, they have money. Well, allegedly. If you ever seen the student loan debt of a new lawyer, you wouldn't think they had money. So the idea is that you target the people who allegedly have the money, and that's just one way. This is an example of web attack. In our case, after we went through our nice little, actually, you all were all snowed in at ShmooCon when all this was happening. So what year was that? That was my big incident response that lasted a week.
2010.
So it was in 2010. February of 2010, they're at ShmooCon, relaxing, and I worked 75 hours in 5 days. So I'm not even sure there's 75 hours in 5 days. Someone add that up for me real quick.
48.
All I know is I turned it in as overtime.
You do it.
But it was a long, hard. So what we did, we installed something between us and the internet, which is a defense. It's not going to eliminate risk, it will only manage risk. And if you're doing security awareness training, you need to make sure your users understand what this is and what it looks like when they see it. Because they'll get upset, I need to go to this website and it's blocked. And yes, it will block legitimate websites. We don't use this product anymore in that I don't realize the firm's name's up there, it doesn't matter. I used to work at Flaherty since Ball and Manasseh. But anyway, is there anything else confidential I can give out in this talk?
Why don't you just post
What's
your
your social
social?
security number, Hackett? So if you're blocking stuff, you have to explain why you're blocking stuff, and sometimes you do medical research, and it will see the medical terminology as porn. So you have to fight it. There's always false positives. So you need to let your users know that if you're blocking a website for fine and why. We're about to wind this up here in the next couple of minutes and we'll break for lunch. Data leakage. Here's another lawyer situation where basically the Lawyer Disciplinary Board, West Virginia State Bar, says that lawyers need to understand what metadata is and take action to protect against disclosing metadata. I'm not going to go into what metadata is. Basically, it's the data behind the data. But here's a regulatory duty to understand what metadata is for a specific segment. So in this case, if you're doing a law firm or talking to lawyers, they need to be aware of this. And there's also, penalties for not following this. Basically, this says that when you send something to opposing counsel and there's a smoking gun in there from an e-discovery point of view, you can't use it. And that's different in West Virginia than it is in someplace like Florida. In Florida, you get the smoking gun and metadata, it's open season. But you can actually be disciplined by the Lawyer Disciplinary Board for using metadata that was given to you in error, I guess. Yes, Mick?
So if there's evidentiary quality information inside metadata and you scrub it, wouldn't you get in trouble though for destroying data as part of e-discovery?
Well, in this case, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, and quite frankly, they don't address that in this opinion. I think they're more worried about things like you've changed a number, like you're doing settlement negotiation, you've changed the number, and someone going through and saying, hey, you changed this number. You said originally that you were going to give my client $4 million, and then you changed it to $2 million.
The thing that comes up in response is give them what they asked for.
Yeah, that's
If they
different.
didn't ask for the metadata, don't give it to them.
That's very true.
But don't destroy it, so that if they come back and they say, oh, we forgot, you can reduce it.
What we're seeing now in the discovery requests is they're requesting metadata. In the past, they haven't. Also, the idea here is to guard the client-attorney relationship. You're representing an insurance company, and you leak metadata that would put that insurance company at a disadvantage, that's an issue.
But even without regard to lawyers and their situations, it is an incredibly important part of security awareness training to train the users that there is metadata attached to the
Exactly,
documents that
and
they
that's the
created, that
purpose
they
of
may
it.
not be aware that it exists.
And that's the purpose of throwing
Like
this
Word
at
documents, they not be aware of the fact that if they send me a Word document, I can go back and see every change they've made to it if they
Right.
don't scrape the metadata.
Exactly, and that's, I don't have these slides, but I just wanted to point out that's something you need to talk about, and I'm not going to go into great detail about. But I tell them that when I use security awareness talks for lawyers, I talk about metadata from A to Z. This is your risk, this is where you find the information, and this is what can happen if you don't properly guard your client-attorney relationship or any other sort of relationship where information may be confidential, not germane to the case, but someone can extract it. You should never let that happen in the first place in this case. In the case of discovery, need discovery, whatever they ask for, you have to give to them, basically. Redlining track changes. This has been issues in, This has been issues in some places I've worked. You have to explain to secretaries if they don't know how to use redlining track changes, that it's something they need to guard against, or they're sending, every change in that document to a client or opposing counsel. And this has happened in real life, unfortunately. And it's real easy to train them what track changes is and how to accept or reject the changes to remove at least the redlining from the document. So the last thing we're talking about is metrics, and this was something that Frank talked about. He said, Hackett said, if you know a good metric, let me know. And these are the metrics that I've used in the past. Help desk tickets. The number of help desk tickets about incident response events, such as malware infections, are they going down? You can track that by looking at tickets. And in my cases, every time that we've applied a security awareness program to an organization, those tickets always went down. The other one which is harder to gauge is, are your users asking good questions? Yeah.
There's a website called Security Metrics Center, which is based off a LinkedIn group called Only Security Metrics, Just Security Metrics. I forget what the hell I named it, but all we talk about is security metrics. And they have a mind map that has huge stuff and things like that inside of it.
I understand. And I think that's great if you send it to me. My whole idea behind this is to keep it simple. Because in this case, you're just taking a snapshot. If you want to do really in-depth data analysis, I think that'd be good. But I'm just coming up with some of the things that I thought of. Can you send that to me so I know what it is? User questions. Are they asking good questions? If somebody gets an attachment, are they clicking it, opening it, or are they calling you first? First of all, if you have to call me to ask me if it's okay to open an attachment or a link, that's a problem. You shouldn't touch it. And downtime. The metric is, are you down less? Are people's work not being interrupted as much as it used to? And you can gauge that by different ways. One is to look at billable hours. If you're in a billable hour paradigm, you can look at profit loss. During a period where we didn't have a security awareness program, we didn't make as much money as we did when we did have a security awareness program. But the two things I want to leave you with today is do something engaging. I'm not a fan of canned programs. It's just as good as buying a blinky light box that you put in your data center that you don't know how to log into after about 4 weeks. Oh yeah, we bought that. It's not good money spent. You don't have to spend a lot of money to build a security awareness program. If you basically build a program that covers the things that I covered today, you have the basis. And you can take that and you can target to different types of users, different kinds of corporations, and basically it's a start. And I'm very, very much an opponent of keeping things very basic to start out with. And on that, you can build your mature security program. Start out with having some policies. Part of security awareness is telling people what the expectation is and what they need to do in order to follow those policies. And I didn't talk about punishment because that is also kind of a hot topic. You need to enforce the policies, but are you going to fire the guy that made you $4 million last year in sales?
No.
it's stupid. I mean, you have to look at, you know, like you said, maybe. You have to look at, I'd fire you, yeah. You have to look at your business model and what's making you money. And in that case, someone may have broke the rules, you slap them on the wrist. You may have, you know, 3 strikes, you're out. The state of West Virginia had that for a while, and I'm not sure how that worked out, but
It didn't work well.
they rolled it back. We can thank our buddy Rob Dixon for that one. But anyway, that's all I have. You all have any questions? Let's go to lunch. Try to be back here by 1 or 1:05 or whatever. Thank you.